let's pop up on the screen. We have got our final celebrity CEO in our series, Tom Adams. By the way, born in Sweden, raised in England and France, history major, which by the way I think is significant. A guy that took Rosetta Stone's revenue tenfold in a short amount of time has the same kind of major that Steve Jobs did at Reed College, that kind of analytical mindset. MBA then from INSEAD, which is kind of considered the Harvard of Europe. 2003, as you know the story, then jumped into Rosetta Stone. Somebody himself, kind of like David Sokol, was an aircraft owner, so when he got into NetJets, he understood it from a customer perspective. A gentleman here who speaks multiple languages, pops in that organization, grows it rapidly, and leads to what is probably the most visible IPO in a very, very tough market in 2009, and was named by Ernst & Young the National Entrepreneur of the Year. And so that's a lot to get done in a short, very, 7 years in a space that blew my mind that this company I was seeing having kiosks there at Dulles International Airport and around the world was actually doing this kind of global business. And so if you would, first we're going to kind of launch a little video and then we'll bring Tom up here on stage. So, Tom Adams, Rosetta Stone.
While the sun was rising on the foothills of the Shenandoah Valley, as it would on other main streets, what was happening in New York was nothing ordinary. A company founded some 17 years ago on an idea so simple it seems almost magical.
Learn another language from Rosetta Stone?
Had now grown to the point it was welcomed on Wall Street and thus able to reach a new kind of global audience.
Rosetta Stone making its debut this morning on the New York Stock Exchange.
CEO TomAdams rang the opening bell.
It will be the first language instruction company to be publicly listed.
There on the NYSE RST.
Rosetta Stone is going public.
Rosetta Stone surging at the open. They're up 40%.
It was just phenomenal.
It was amazing. I mean, we've dreamed about this, but we didn't think that it was actually going to be so emotional.
In 2006, when I interviewed with Tom, he was talking about taking this company public. And so for me, it's been a labor of love, and now to see this culmination has been just so exciting and real rewarding for the team.
Rosetta Stone is not your ordinary company. It runs on human energy fueled by intelligence and a pinpoint-focused mission to make language learning available to everyone. And that means everyone. Just try keeping up with CEO Tom Adams.
Okay, well, welcome to Rosetta Stone. My name is Tom Adams. I'm CEO, and I'm going to show you around today. When we started working to take the company public about a year ago, we settled on the name for the project as Project Churchill. A reason being that he had said some wise words about this is not the end, not even the beginning of the end, but it is maybe the end of the beginning. We're sort of celebrating that thought, that this is a new start for the company, and we're only just getting started at conquering language learning. That's a packed room if I've ever seen one. You guys, what are you guys up to? Training. When we think about what we're doing in this industry, we are not here to make a small impact. We're here to change the overall way people learn languages. And for it to really work, it needs to work in a natural way, in a way that's natural for the learner. And the only way to accomplish that is to avoid translation, not confuse the learner with any grammar explanation. And doing that in a technology-enabled way has not been done by anyone before. So this team develops content development tools at any given time, editors, writers, translators, voices working around the world, creating all of our products.
If you're out of breath, that's because at Rosetta Stone, there's no time to relax. Well, maybe just for a second.
No! There we go.
Rosetta Stone began with an idea on Main Street, went public on Wall Street, and is now going global.
Let's welcome Tom Adams.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It was very kind of Vern to invite me to talk to you today. And my job here, I think, is just to tell you our story and to share with you how we got to where we did. And hopefully you can learn something from that or take away some sort of lesson from our experience that you can apply to your own business. So the first disclaimer is I actually did not start Rosetta Stone. It was started by this man, Alan Stoltzfus, and he started it back in 1992. He was a man who had struggled to learn languages and had had personal breakthroughs when he went to the country where they spoke the language. But I also have personal language learning experience when, for example, when I was 10 years old, my parents moved from France to England. I was thrown into this school with this crazy uniform, all of this sort of strange stuff that people do in England, and couldn't speak any English. And I had to just figure out the language, and I just had to figure out the language there by looking at things and essentially learning the same way a child learns. So I built enormous passion for language learning. And that's further reinforced by my personal experience of learning German in school, which I found to be incredibly boring. I got the high grades, but I couldn't speak the language. And I learned with grammar, explanations, with translations. And it seemed the most normal thing to everybody there. But of course, we know that we learn languages very, very well. In fact, every single person here has successfully done it at least once. But many of us have struggled with second language acquisition. And the reason is that we try to use different methods, different parts of the brain to learn a new language the second time. At Rosetta Stone, we believe that you're all fantastically gifted. And so our job is to allow you to use the best computer there is, which is inside your head, and figure out the language naturally. So to get you all engaged, we're going to do an exercise here and learn a bit of Spanish. And many of you will know this language already to some degree. But actually, even if you don't, you can do this exercise with me, and you'll see how you can decipher language even without any translation or grammar explanation, and you can indeed make a sentence from scratch just from this kind of pattern. So if the first top left-hand corner image is él necesita dinero, the second one is ella tiene dinero, and then below that is él necesita un paraguas, then that fourth image must be ella tiene un paraguas, right? So it's that easy. And you know what each of those words means. And we add to that now with our new Totally solution an opportunity for you to practice with native speakers. So you learn a bunch of language, you then go into a social environment where you will have, for 1 hour, conversation all in Spanish. There's not a single use of English within that hour. And so it's very validating of all the learning that you've done up till then. And all of that is really based on a vision we have of how you should learn. So we have a unique method. We have leading technology where we apply speech recognition, so your voice drives your progress through the learning experience. We've got proprietary content. There's over 200 hours in one of our courses in Spanish, for instance, of sequential interactive activity. That's about 100 Hollywood movies worth that's been configured by our instructional technologists. And we add to that now success-oriented services with conversational coaches who are native speakers and so on. And all of that leads to us winning lots of awards, having customers be happy, the product being effective in scientific tests. And with that, we've established what is a disruptive value proposition. And you can see here that really that we think that there's a trade-off that the markets had to make historically between quality of instruction and results and convenience and price. And that trade-off has been forced upon people because, frankly, either software's not been developed well or it's been an audio kind of product where you would just listen to the language. And obviously, if you're just listening, you're not engaging. So we are not tapes. We are really a very interactive process, the same way people learn languages when they're in a classroom, except it's all powered, obviously, by your computer. And that's all happening in what is a large market. We've sized it. I recommend you all to sort of do surveys where you can just buy a list of about 5,000 or 10,000 individuals in a given country. You ask them about their spending habits. It's very cheap. You can do it probably for about $10,000, maybe $20,000. And if you have a good statistician at hand, you can really start to carve out your understanding of the market and see how people are already spending. And there are very cheap web tools that you can use to do that. What's helpful for us is knowing that there are literally tens of millions of people learning languages in the markets that we're already addressing today. And we're just in 5 different countries right now, although we've been sold to people in over 150. So my job today is really to tell you the story of how we went from this small company based in Harrisonburg, Virginia, to this grand listing on the New York Stock Exchange. And many of you may aspire or think about potentially having an IPO as a way to provide an exit for some of your investors, even if you want to stay on yourself. So the first thing that we had to do when I came on, and we were about $10 million in revenue. This year we're going to do about $300 million. And when I came on, the first job was to get the company to generate cash. We had less than $1 million of cash in the business. I was working for a family that didn't want to take in outside equity at that time. And so really we had to solve the problem by finding very profitable, discrete ways to market the product and generate immediate sales. And so there was a built-in risk aversion in how we went to market. So what we did was we developed a very direct marketing model. And for anyone trying to build a bootstrapped business, that's really the best way to go about it, because you don't need to know that much or be that smart up front. You can learn as you go. Because in effect, whether you're using offline or online marketing channels, you can tie sales to individual marketing initiatives. And as you do that, you figure out what's profitable and what isn't. And that's indeed how we got started with kiosks, because kiosks was really an idea around how do you get people to understand what we do. We're not a sort of staple product here in the United States. It's not something people do every day. People have a very fixed idea of how they learn languages normally. How do you do that? So we needed to demonstrate the product, and one of the ways would be to set up little stations. So we set up the kiosks, but we tracked the sales at the kiosks, and the kiosks were profitable. And so we could scale those kiosks. And over time, of course, the kiosks did something much more important for our company than generate sales, which was to build the brand. Other initiatives we did was we bought a sort of single print ad and would run that with a unique phone number, and we would count all the calls from that call to action. We ran TV, radio, and so on. And all of that led to enormous scalability, but tremendous risk management and also continuous optimization of all of our sales and marketing activities. We are very lucky in that as a company, we were afforded the opportunity to develop a fantastic product line, really without any strong competition. When I came on, the software that was being sold had essentially been in the same shape for several years already. And I knew that it would take many years to get to the next sort of cycle of innovation. We worked on that. We released version 3. It was a highly acclaimed product. And then we went on towards developing version 4, which was released just this year. We did all that by understanding, really at the core, what was good about the product, why it was successful, and innovating on that. But that was really part of getting us to the IPO. Finally, it was this brand development, and it was something that we kind of walked into becoming a brand because of what we were doing and how we were approaching our industry and because of the kiosks that we were using to generate sales. But over time, we became increasingly conscious about what the brand could represent to the company. And so we started investing in it. When I joined the company, by the way, the company wasn't yellow. And for those of you who know the color of flags, the Swedish flag is both blue and yellow. And it's frankly by accident, but none of my colleagues believe me, that we moved to this much more yellow and blue packaging. But it gave us a very distinctive presence. And the box or the Farm Boy ad or Michael Phelps became real icons of our marketing and had very positive associations with the overall brand. One of the things I want to point out about our whole go-to-market approach, as you maybe look to see parallels with your own business, is that of course there's word of mouth in our business. We benefit enormously from people recommending Rosetta Stone to someone else. But we knew that if we were going to grow at the rate we wanted to, we really needed to have much more active promotion. And the key to that was really about demonstration. Because you don't understand how Rosetta Stone could possibly pull off teaching a language without translating, without explaining the grammar, and without a teacher actively explaining the language. And so you kind of need to experience it. And that's why we had all these calls to actions and so forth. And so the advertising, all of that really was geared towards that demonstration effort. We also obviously had the kiosks, which gave people an opportunity to try it right there. I recently asked colleagues to evaluate what it would cost us to do advertising with the same amount of sort of square footage, if you like, as we have with our kiosks. It's about $5,000 to $12,000 per month per location that it would cost us to do that kind of advertising. Except for us, it's self-funded. Indeed, it's profitable. So we're able to be in all these locations, have people experience it, and it's profitable and so forth. And so all of that, again, helped us build the brand as well as capture sales. We have an institutional sales force that's very active with schools, so we're in about 20,000 schools. We're also active with the US government, and all of that was very helpful. And the previous presentation focused a lot on social media and online marketing. We are very active in that, have always been. Social media has probably picked up much more in the last 12 months as more people are becoming habitual sort of Facebook or Twitter actives. Finally, most of our sales are actually direct. So one of the most important things for a small business like Rosetta Stone when we were getting off the ground was to be able to measure things. And so being able to record the sale on our website at our call centers was critical because we only had about 15% of our sales going through channel partners like Amazon or Barnes & Noble and so forth. And as a result of that, you could really tie the sales. If you go with a channel strategy, obviously you can't do this very direct marketing anymore. All of that led to us establishing this strong brand, as I've mentioned, and so we have really dominant recognition in the marketplace. It's hard for people to know of any other brand other than Rosetta Stone in the market based on all of our activity. One night in about 2006, I had this epiphany at about 3 a.m. I woke up, as many of you do, I sleep, I kind of process the business in my head, even as I sleep. And I woke up and I realized, I know what we have to do. We have to get our house in order. There had been so many discrete events that I'd been subjected to throughout the company where we were letting down customers or the systems weren't in place and so forth. And we initiated this Ohio program. And it was Ohio, which meant that people could get rallied around a brand name. But essentially, it was all about getting our house in order. And to do that, we put in Oracle systems. We had Deloitte do audits. We engaged with different CRM solutions like Parachute that I can highly recommend. We used Upper Quadrant to manage our marketing business. We started shaping with the advent of a management buyout that I'll talk about very shortly, putting in audit committees, board of directors, and so forth, so that really we were running as a public company for about 12 to 18 months before we were even public in terms of our procedures and so forth. Obviously, we had to get the right systems around human resources and so forth. And with a company like Rosetta Stone, we had to get into the business of policing our intellectual property and becoming professional about that. Because as we built the brand, we learned that there were an increasing number of criminals that were sort of ripping off the software out of China and doing things like that. But those two components were only really enabled by the fact that we built a fantastic team and we had a great culture. And we nurtured that culture to become truly fantastic, allowing us to grow and add employees, and even as we added employees, still maintain a good part of the culture. So obviously, Alan had founded a great company, had a great culture when I came on, but my first realization was that we needed to have something to align everyone around. And so I developed a mission statement. And there are many companies that have mission statements. Maybe all companies have mission statements. I think that the most important thing is how you develop the mission statement in order for it to get buy-in. So as we sat around as a management team, we sort of said, okay, what are we going to do? How do we achieve something big? Our goal became to deliver the best technology-based solutions for learning languages. That's a very functional statement. It is not an emotional mission statement. But the first and most important thing for us was to make sure that everyone got what we were trying to do. And so it's technology-based solutions, not just software, not just product solutions. So we were already thinking about services in the mix. And it was to deliver the best technology-based solutions for learning, not just practicing, languages. And so all of that gave us enormous focus. And that focus still is in place today. Also, as we grew, we discovered that not everyone that we brought on board understood the world the way we did. And that's probably something very familiar to many of you as you expand your workforce. And we went very quickly from 100 to 500 to 1,000, and we're now about 2,000 employees in the company. So it becomes a phenomenal challenge as you grow to maintain what you have, because very often entrepreneurs have built wonderful businesses that have really, the whole secret to the success is in the culture. So we went to work again on values. And every company has values. But what we did was two things that I think are critical to have success with values. One was that I met with every single employee in the company to get their input on what they believed was wonderful about the company, what needed to be better, so that we had some stretch in the values so that we could grow and better the culture. But most importantly, when I played this back to them, it was catchy and memorable. So we have values like speak up, speak out, play together, play hard, create evangelists, change the world. And so you can have more values if you have more catchy phrases because people can internalize it. And actually it's very, very hard, and I would say next to impossible, to define a value system around just 4 statements, which is typically what people go for. They just say integrity, trust or something like this. And it's just not enough. So we have a lot of values, probably about 9, and they're couplets. So it gives us tremendous opportunity to define the kind of behaviors that we're looking for. We also went about developing constitutions so that our products were branded. We wanted the experience of a learner to be very defined, very unlike anything else. If you think of Apple, they are the most branded product experience you know of. It is not an accident. And the same goes for Rosetta Stone. It's a very branded, very consistent experience as you sort of go through it. It's very intuitive and easy. And of course, all this time, we were developing the organizational structure. And I would say that as a company, we started out with sales and with product development. We then started taking on more senior functions, bringing on CFOs, chief operating officers, and so forth, much later. I think that's very healthy. Having just done it once and done it this way, I think that that's one of the reasons we were able to progress. Some companies start out, I think, very top-heavy with people who are too big, think too big. And so we had more tactical people at the beginning and grew to be more strategic and emphasize scale much more over time. Obviously, we added these international offices. Out of interest, how many of you have international operations or offices outside the US? Okay, so that number will go up over the coming years because you'll all get very excited about the opportunities internationally. But I find it very challenging, even for a company like Rosetta Stone with lots of multilingual, multicultural people, to expand internationally. The key word for me has been patience, but determination obviously built into that patience, where it simply takes longer to get things off the ground. You kind of forget how long it took to get the original company off the ground, and you want to rush and just quickly create presences in different markets. It's taken us longer, but now it's growing at a phenomenal rate. So in the first half, we had something close to 200% year-on-year growth in our international operations, and that's really what's lifting the company at this time. Finally, in terms of the capital structure and getting the right partners, the founder's family at one point asked me to find them some form of liquidity. They wanted to keep part of their equity in the business, but they wanted some liquidity. And we went about this massive process. And some of you may be considering bringing on private equity or venture capital. It is probably the biggest decision you make, I would guess. If you get it right, it's not the biggest decision you ever made because it just works. But if you get it wrong, I hear from many people it can be hell, and you can lose control of your business. The great thing about the partners that I brought on for Rosetta Stone was that ABS and Norwest really had a philosophy of empowerment. So they were investing and backing management teams, and it was something that was true. And you can actually find this out by talking to CEOs that you choose to speak to that they've invested in, because you suddenly discover that one of these funds that's been telling you that they're all about management actually are rather hierarchical and pretty much tell their CEOs what they want them to be doing. And here, with ABS and Norwest, I showed up for my first meeting and I said, "What do you want to do?" And they said, "Well, we want you to tell us what you want to do, and then we'll get excited." And that's absolutely what happened. And indeed, in the sort of dark days of the financial crisis, when we were thinking of going public, the decision was essentially delegated to me on picking the time. And they backed me even at that time. Also, obviously, you've got to pick your partners. If you're going on the IPO route, get your lawyers in very early. There's an enormous amount of work that they have to do to prepare you for the IPO. And also, obviously, you need to consider the investment banks very carefully. We went with one bulge bracket firm, which was Morgan Stanley. They did an outstanding job for us. I am sure other bulge bracket firms also do fantastic work on IPOs. But all the other banks that we chose, we really chose just because of the investment, the analysts that they would be allocating to our account. And so by having coverage, we get more attention from more funds over time.
Before you move on, could you go back to that previous slide? Maybe it's just me. The product constitution is new in this new brand Bible. Could you just dig in a little bit? And also, do you guys formally use top grading as the method for selecting people? Okay. So talk about a little bit of that constitution. What's on there and the like?
Right. So as an example, you have a product that is Rosetta Stone will be interactive. You don't have a Rosetta Stone that you just listen to. You have to be back and forth every few seconds. So one of the words there is interactive. Another one might be elegant. And so we believe our solutions should be simple, with no technology for technology's sake, and so forth. And so there are about 7 or 8 words and lots of definition of what meaning is imputed in those words. And as a result of that, any innovation that happens at Rosetta Stone is kind of run through that filter. And it's an incredibly constraining innovation environment in one way, but it's also very empowering because it means that we innovate inside the box. One of our insights, I think, about innovation has been that it's, people always say, think out of the box. Well, actually, it's much harder to think inside a new box. So we typically write down stretch goals, such as, and they are captured in our Constitution, that we have to teach a language without translation, without any explanation of the language. We're now potentially thinking about saying without any text, and then it must be all in an interactive experience. Now go and create a product that does a wonderful job of teaching people, that makes it easy to learn, but that respects those constraints. It's incredibly hard, and yet the solution has to be easy and intuitive to the learner. But that's the power of the innovation that drives Rosetta Stone. And so within your industries, I'm sure there are impossible asks from your engineering team. But if you make those the sort of explicit constraints, and then you have a customer-oriented purpose for your products, people will sort of come to you and show you things that meet those requirements. It's been a very powerful element and has led to us really on a generational basis having consistency and continuing to push the envelope in our industry. In terms of the brand, I believe that the brand is probably something more dynamic in terms of its definition than a mission statement or values or even a product constitution. I believe the brand needs to resonate with people. So our brand ideas have typically lasted about 3 years. And we review those regularly and nuance them. But the brand, obviously, idea has an established process, and many people have engaged advertising agencies over time to help them figure out how to brand their company better. What's less usual, I think, is this product constitution, which has allowed us to essentially develop branded experiences within our solutions. And we've carried that even to services and we're in the city of Orlando, so I'll give some credit to Disney Institute, who helped us figure out how to create a branded service experience, where if you go to Rosetta Stone and interact with any of our agents, or you have a conversational coaching session, you're going to feel success. And that's by design. We have thought very, very hard about what the magic of interacting socially online needs to be. It could be many things. It could be safe, it could be reliable, all these. For us, you will come away feeling success, that you did it. You were able to converse for 1 hour. That blew you away. It impressed you that you could speak for an hour in Chinese after only doing interactive learning. So when we went to the IPO, this was the pitch from Morgan Stanley. They'd sort of mocked up a version of the Farm Boy ad, and for sure the markets were very fickle. We engaged them in the summer of 2008. You'll remember towards the second half of 2008, we had the happiness of the Lehman collapse and so forth. But to be honest, the road to the IPO started much earlier than that. So already back in 2006, we had set out to get on a track that would put us in a position where we could IPO the company. So in short, we probably spent about 4 years thinking, planning, working towards that goal. I don't suggest that you can't do it faster, but I would urge you to think about it well ahead of when you want to do it, because you want your systems and your teams to be as developed as they can be, because believe me, things are very much under the microscope as soon as you're public, and people like to second-guess CEOs a lot in the financial community. And so the better your back office, the better for you, obviously. So roadshow. So for those of you who haven't been on a roadshow, it's about the craziest thing CEOs get to do. It is akin to being a musician or something like that, where they fly you around to different cities around the world, typically US and Europe, and you'll sort of just get taken around. So we were in 4 countries within the first, I think, 24 hours of the roadshow being launched. And essentially what you do is you go to meet different investment professionals and you make your pitch. You just tell them about your business. They hear what you have to say about it. They ask you a few questions and off you go to the next meeting. While the country was clearly in crisis when we launched our roadshow right at the beginning of April, this was close to the low point and the worst time for the financial industry. For the financial industry, there was a real benefit to that, which was that there was no one else to meet with. So we probably had more people attend our meeting, more people sit down and talk to us than we would have had in a normal environment. And as a result, our IPO was oversubscribed something like 25 times, even at that darkest hour, because there was simply nothing else to invest in. So my takeaway from that is that, don't worry so much about the external environment. If you're ready and your business is sound and you've done all the prep, I think that that's the critical element. You can go. You are not that dependent on the external environment. There's plenty of money still around. When we filed to go public, this is my comment about the media. When we filed to go public, we were one of the 5 dumbest things in America that week. It was this guy called Aristotle. And we had just submitted our S1 to the SEC and had asked them to sort of consider us to go public. So we hadn't gone public, obviously. But 6 months later, when we went public, we were one of the 5 smartest things. So my takeaway is don't worry so much about the media. And I use this slide to communicate to my team back in Harrisonburg and in other offices that we shouldn't pay attention too much to what the outside world is going to say about us, because clearly they don't know all the facts. They don't know the details, even of a public event like this. As was mentioned in the video, the project to go public was really around this idea that it's not the end, it's not even the beginning of the end, but is maybe the end of the beginning. And I think that's how all CEOs have to see the IPO. Because as soon as you're public, the next day, you still have to sell product, you still have to motivate your team, you still have to build out your systems and nurture the whole organization. It just doesn't stop with the IPO. It can be a liquidity event for all sorts of investors, but for you, frankly, it's just a stepping stone. And so it's important to sort of recognize that and get your team to understand that, because many people see it as, sort of winning and sort of things ending at that point. Let me just sort of close by saying that as a company, we have many exciting growth opportunities still ahead for us. We have more targeted solutions that we're developing. So we're developing a solution for the Japanese market where we'll get them to start speaking. We will be developing shorter courses for people who just want a crash course. There are many things we're doing now that we weren't doing before. We have over $100 million of cash and no debt as a result, partly of the IPO. So we're in a great position to really entertain all sorts of opportunities, including increasing the customer lifetime value and then going global. So over the coming year and a bit, we'll be rolling out lots of new offices. So as I sort of reflect on the whole road of going from this small family-owned business to private equity invested company to being public, my role has not really changed that much. It's still about leading a team around an idea of serving the customer, and yet, at the same time, I've had to grow tremendously as a person because the demands just keep getting bigger, obviously, as the company expands and as the company is more under scrutiny by outsiders. And maybe to just close it, that if you do choose to take your company public, it is a wonderful emotional experience. And people say it doesn't matter, but that's like saying it doesn't matter where you choose to get married or how you get married or what that wedding day is like. It's a very important, special memory that you get to have with a group of friends, essentially, that you become with the team that you take the company public with. So with that, I'll happily take any questions that you may have, and yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Say again, when were you 10 million in revenue? What year was that?
2002.
2002. Is that when you came on board, you said?
Yeah, so right at the beginning of 2003.
Okay, okay. All right, that's it. Just for my mindset. Thank you.
Yeah. Here we go. And while we're going over there, Tom, so you come into the company at 10 million. What were the first, what did you do the first 3 months?
Okay.
You know, they talk about the first 100 days is kind of critical for a new leader. How did you handle that?
So I think in the first 3 months, my key was the founder had died from a heart attack. There was a sort of vacuum in the company from a leadership perspective. The company had tried to innovate in all sorts of areas without much success. And so my first job, frankly, out of the gates as CEO was to sort of get the team united behind a big mission. And we argued about it a lot, but that was probably the number one thing I did at that time. We were also, at that time, trying to figure out whether we could scale the business tactically and find smart ways of selling product, enough product to pay for the sort of continuous marketing effort that we wanted to set up. So in those first months, we evaluated, how to do kiosks and how to do them better. We evaluated also, how to do some tests. But it was really a lot about figuring out what we wanted to do and how we could start generating cash, because that was probably more necessary for anything. We didn't have a lot of money, as I said, less than $1 million, and that was what was most important.
Just to follow up on the kiosk question, I'm just curious how your airport kiosks perform relative to like in a shopping mall. It's always fascinating to see what people buy at the airport.
You see, so I always get questions about kiosks, which is great because it means they have great marketing value on top of whatever they're selling. They represent, in aggregate, about 13% of our overall revenue is all of our kiosks. So 1-3. So even though most of you experience the brand through a kiosk, most of you choose not to transact at that point of sale. Mall kiosks tend to do less well than airports, but our best kiosks are also in malls. So some of our mall kiosks have just tremendous traffic and tremendous success. I think the key for us was the ability to scale that program gradually, and we were able to grow from a single kiosk at Dulles Airport to a cluster in DC, and then to replicate that around the country. And we have over 150 kiosks nationwide at this time.
Tom, on one of your slides, it said that you had HR brand report to the CEO. What did you mean by that, HR brand? And did that mean HR department?
Yeah, no, so I think in many companies, human resources is considered something that's very administrative. And that's how I considered it at the outset. So I had it reporting to the head of operations. Over time, I came to appreciate that human resources is kind of the enabler of so many other things that you want to do. As a result, when I restructured the company back in 06, I believe, or 05, I pulled HR to report directly to me. And it enabled me to sort of become more strategic about the organization, which is hard to do if it's reporting to somebody who reports to you as CEO. The second element of your question was around the brand. And the brand, for a long time, was not managed with focus. It was something that was housed within sales and marketing in general. And yet, what I discovered was that sales and marketing are so under the gun to deliver short-term performance that it's hard to have them nurture a long-term brand identity and to undertake the kinds of projects that are required to continuously elevate a brand. And as a result of that, I had moved brand marketing away from sales and marketing to report directly to me. So.
Tom, right here.
Yep.
So once you had $100 million, how do you make sure that like sales or whatever doesn't have the urge like winning the lottery, I've got this money, I got to spend it? That you make sure that it's really being used effectively?
So that's a great question. I think that when you have cash on the balance sheet, the question always comes up, which is what do we do with it? And then should we behave differently? I think that as you get bigger, the reality is you have to make bolder bets. And so sales and marketing, I think, within Rosetta Stone is from a culture that is so tactical. It is so micro in its approach where, they're essentially held accountable for making sure that, the money we spend on print ads in the National Geographic in the month of August is profitable. So they're working at that detail level. As a result, culturally within our walls, the idea that they would be able to go and poach a lot of money from the 100 million is sort of remote. However, I actually believe that it is important for the company as it grows to make bigger bets, to continuously rejuvenate the brand and grow the company further. And I think having money in the bank, frankly, does change your approach because you simply know that if we don't get this right, we can regroup and go again, which we couldn't when we were starting out.
Tom. My name's Kevin Comerford, and I own an $18 million heating and air conditioning business. And I'm one of those entrepreneur companies that's looking to become a professional management company. And I've just hired my CEO in June of this year. What advice would you have for me that is an owner that's looking to step out of being an entrepreneur or wanting my company to step out of that entrepreneurial role company and move into more of a professional management company?
Yeah, so I think it really is about, it's about you. It's not about the CEO. And I think that you as the owner need to make sure that you're comfortable. And you can only get comfortable if you feel like the heart and soul of the company is consistent with your idea. So if the person has a totally different set of values, they're more short-term oriented than you are, or they don't care about employees, they just care about the bottom line, or you find that they don't have good aesthetics, you have a very strong identity and brand image that you want to maintain, then you won't be able to escape because you have so much passion already for your business. The brother of the founder stayed on as chairman for the first few years when I was CEO, and he was not very involved in any of the business, but he was there to get comfortable that I knew what I was doing and that I wasn't going to spoil something fantastic. And that was even as I had commercial success and was overseeing growth of the company, our conversation still focused on how do you maintain a great culture, how do you have a very good brand, how do you give customers the right kind of experience. Because although many owners have the humility to realize that there may be someone who's already been there, done that, and that has had success that you can leverage, at the same time you shouldn't be, as an owner that wants to step out, humble about your sense of culture and your sense of right and wrong, etc. That's something that led to your success. And so that was, I think, key in the success of the company, was that there was a very good transition from the family to me and the management team that I built, where I, as CEO, was sort of aware somehow from my interactions with Eugene, who was the chairman, that he cared about more than just the bottom line.
Tom, hi. Yours is an industry that's rife with piracy. And you, as the dominant player in that industry, probably suffer the most. I know I had the opportunity about 6 weeks ago to do a presentation for Eric Doering, and I researched Rosetta Stone, and from that day I get emails, my email box is flooded with impersonators who claim to be Rosetta Stone offering me your software at 10 cents on the dollar. What can you do to fight the piracy, and proactively, what can you do to prevent more loss of revenue and a tarnishment of your brand?
Yeah, so I think that there's two questions in that. One is, what should we do as a society and government and so forth? And then the other one is, what do we do as practical businessmen that have to live with the imperfect world? So the first one is that we as a company have taken a very hard line on piracy. So we throw people in jail many times a year for piracy. And that may sound bad to you, but these are people who are essentially stealing what we have spent millions of dollars developing for their own enrichment. So people who are producing and distributing software this way, we're very aggressive with. I also believe, from a government point of view, that search engines have essentially positioned themselves in a very convenient way for their own profit generation models to sell your trademark keyword to pirates who are based in China. Therefore, the search engine like Google will enrich itself by selling trademark terms to Chinese pirates and so on. And we're campaigning very much to stop that, because we think it's not good for America that this kind of practice is enabled by many of these search engines. The reality is that we can't maybe change the world quickly enough to deal with challenges like that. So what we do as a company is we try to create more virtual value in the offering. So one of the great benefits of version 4 Totality from a piracy perspective is that you cannot get Rosetta Stone version 4 in a pirated format, because there are all these social and service-oriented elements of the offering, as well as your user model, that they will not manage. And over time, those are going to become increasingly important. And already today, I like to emphasize that, learning with Rosetta Stone includes interacting with native speakers, and that will augment your chances of becoming conversational by a very big factor. As a result, if you're buying pirated old product, you will not have as good results as you will with the latest, most innovative offering that we have. So I think it's a balance of both tacks that we need to take. But frankly, all of you, if you are suffering from search engines or pirates, I think you have to fight it. Most of us would rather not. We have much more exciting things that we want to do with our business, much more customer-oriented things that we're passionate about. But if we don't fight as a society against this, what do we have left? Is kind of how I put it to my team. Because this country that I've come to love and where I've sort of lived and where I'm raising my family has historically thrived from having the best intellectual property environment in the world. And I think that that is being threatened now and we need to sort of come together and make sure that that gets right.
Tom, when you came on board, how many languages were you selling in, and how many are you selling today?
So when I came on board, we were selling 24. We're now at 31. But also, on top of the 31 that you guys can all buy, we have another 6 languages which are endangered languages. And that relates to our efforts to help, at this time, Native American peoples to preserve their language. So for example, last week we released a Navajo product where the 35,000 or so people who live and want to develop their Navajo culture are able to now interact in a Rosetta Stone solution and develop their knowledge of their own language, because very often in those cultures there's been a collapse in the proficiency of that language. Any other?
Tom, when you talked about the product constitution, were you speaking sort of the perceptions that you wanted to own in the marketplace and that would also resonate with the marketplace when you're determining a new product or how the product was going to be presented?
So there were 2 goals with the product constitution. The first goal was really around, we wanted our products to be branded experiences. So we wanted it to feel very integrated, very, that it had a certain character. We thought that that was something that would help us build the brand. The second element, which was probably more important, was I didn't want to have this argument every day about whether in this screen we should allow a pop-up window, or whether here we would allow a sort of frequently asked questions around the grammar of that particular element. And because we didn't want to have a series of these arguments, because we believed in them in a fundamentalist way, but in the right fundamentalist way, we thought it was better to upfront say to the teams, here are your constraints, don't negotiate these, just stick to these and execute. And that meant that we didn't have time-consuming discussions that might have delayed innovation, delayed product development, because you weren't going to move me on several parameters, and many of my colleagues had their own pet dimensions. And so this allowed us as a senior team, product team, I would say, to get on the same page and get energized behind something that also, by the way, felt very bold. And bold is exciting for engineers. So it was very motivating at the same time to have this constitution.
Could you say more about your core values?
Yeah, so our core values were, they're probably the same as many other companies, to be frank. Many good companies have core values around open communication. The question is, how can you emotionalize those words? If you say open communication, people just go, oh yeah. And so what we did was we said, speak up, speak out. And so I don't say that very often, but my teams always use it. And when they want to speak truth to power, they say, I'm just speaking up and speaking out, and here's what I think. And so the values are, be original and nurture creativity. For example, we want to be different from others in the same way that Apple's different from other hardware companies. And so we kind of melded a set of values that were oriented around our beliefs of what is good business and also our beliefs about what is good community in the company. And we just married those, and you can sort of, one interesting sort of side note for you is that we started out with something like 8 values, and after a year I added 1 value. And that was because I'd missed something. And we had developed this beautiful visual and distributed it to everyone. And I went, darn, we really needed to say this. And the value we had forgotten, which to me was so self-evident, I didn't think you needed it, was take responsibility, serve helpfully. And my thought was, everyone gets that, I delegate, now you own it. but you don't really own it in the sense that you've got all the burden of responsibility, but by the way, it's in service of others, so make sure that everybody else is happy. And I got to that really by seeing interactions and events in the company which were very disagreeable to me, where I would see someone who said, yeah, I'm head of the website, and here's how we're going to do it. And I knew that the sales and marketing head was not satisfied with that. And he kind of just kept nodding at him, but essentially he was going to follow his own path. And so for that guy, I knew if we'd said to him before it's about serve helpfully, he would have gotten more what we were looking for from our leaders. And in terms of take responsibility, I remember an instance where one of my direct reports had messed up on something and in his area. And I said to him, what the hell happened there? And he just pointed at one of his reports and said, well, it's this guy. And that drove me crazy because I don't see the point of having someone that's reporting to me that doesn't take responsibility. And so I think I think that the authenticity of the values is important, probably above everything, and then the fact that you can remember the values so that they can be communicated. Because after that initial energy that you build around getting everyone on the same page about what kind of community, what kind of behaviors do we want to encourage, 5 years later, that it's new people and it's all died out. And so how can they get energized on your values? And that only happens if you've got something catchy and clever. And it's not that clever, but catchy.
Hola, ¿cómo está?
Muy bien.
Hey, I am a Rosetta Stone customer. What you've done is really amazing. I run a software company that's 15 years old that had to educate its market about what we do. And it's very difficult. And was it the demonstrations that was key, or what strategy would you employ to educate a product that's business to business?
That's great. So I think that the communication insight is one of demonstrate. And by the way, it's a great rigor in your development process, because if your developers know you've got to demonstrate this to the customer, they know that the feedback loop is pretty tight on if there's something missing or wrong. But still, I think demonstration is the key. And I think in a B2B environment, having a sales force that knows how to demo the product over WebEx or over, by meeting face-to-face would be critical. At the same time, I think that by us understanding that although we built this interactive immersion-oriented system that really drew its first inspiration from learning in-country, we knew that the in-country learning experience was not an experience that everyone had. And so we couldn't just say to people, it's like learning a language by going abroad. People kind of know intellectually that that makes sense. But if you haven't done it, you don't emotionally connect with it. And so our aha was that actually let's recognize that one of the inspirations for the product was this idea that children learn naturally. And that's something that's universal. And so by finding the sort of universal pain point and recognized solution, we were able to make people understand how method matters. Having said all this, I'm not sure we're very successful at communicating. I think most people still see Rosetta Stone just as a yellow company, as a language company. I'm not sure everyone has internalized what differences there are between us and the classroom that they attended, even though the list of differences is extremely long. So while clearly we've had some success, I would say that very much like you, we're still a work in progress. We're still agonizing on how do we communicate better. So I guess your situation's not that different to ours.
Hey, Tom, two quick questions. What percentage of your business is English, and how is that growing as you expand overseas in international markets? And then the second one is, as as the leading language learning company or a leading learning company, do you guys have any plans to branch out into other types of products besides language?
Very good. All right, first question's easy, which is that about a quarter of our sales are English. Most of the English sales are actually in K through 12, where we work with schools on ESL issues, which is, we're very proud of that. But also, about 70% or so of our sales in Asia are of English, sometimes even higher percentages than that. And that's obviously allowed us to focus more of our product development towards English as we try to capture those massive markets. Just to give you an idea, Japan spends twice as much money in aggregate as the US on language training. It's on a smaller population, and it's mostly English. So it does shift our approach as we go into those markets, and we're really excited about all the growth we're seeing there. The question of us going after other areas of learning is one that is obviously up for discussion. So there are two rival theories, and I'm sure in your business you have the same, which is, do you diversify or do you focus? And there's enormous potential and runway still in the learning industry. Most people still go to a classroom and have their teacher write out on the whiteboard, je, tu, il, est, and all, you know, just the conjugations, you memorize the vocab list, you fill in the blanks and all that. So in a way, you think we should focus on that and really take over language learning. At the same time, I'm passionate about learning in general, and I think that learning technology is something that's totally underdeveloped. I would argue that there are almost no companies out there that truly have interactive technology that teaches. Most technology players in the education industry are streaming video or making you read things, and then you do a quiz to validate that you got what they said. And it, frankly, isn't consistent with the potential of technology to change how your brain works. And if you think about Rosetta Stone as a language company, what we try to do is have you interact, and then as you leave the computer, without you having memorized or drilled or done anything like this, you know stuff. And that's what we'd like to do in other areas. But the question is, when do we diversify? And I'd like, you know, as CEO of the company, I always want to go sooner rather than later. But my management team is one that's very eager to keep the focus so that they can execute and do their job.
Tom, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then we have one here. How much are the Chinese focused on learning English? Has English won? Or do we need to, excuse me, or do we need to learn Mandarin? Because you've got to have a unique kind of view on that situation.
Yeah,
and then I'll ask you a second one.
So we try not to scare everyone, because it's just, I don't see the point. But the reality is that the US right now has a disproportionate share of global GDP, and as you all know, the rest of the world is growing much faster than the US. As a result, every single company is going to look for growth to come from some of these emerging markets. If you take the UK, and these are interesting statistics for you to think about, gradually UK companies have had increasingly international management teams. So 44% of FTSE 100 companies today were not born in the UK. So that means that, you know, huge numbers of senior, absolute top senior executive positions are now being filled by people who very often speak more than one language. By the way, 65% of executives of FTSE 100 companies now have lived, of CEOs in FTSE 100 companies, have lived abroad. So that's important because the UK today has about 70% of its revenues coming from outside the UK. The US 10 years ago was at about a third of revenues of S&P 500 companies coming from outside the US. It's now 50%. And it's going to get to 70% in the next 10 to 15 years. If you're in the board room and you're thinking about what kind of leadership you want, the international element is only going to get more important, because that's where your growth and your shareholder value is going to come from. And so we've done extensive studies on this. We'll be sort of publishing more of this information. But actually using the UK as a case study of where we might go, I think is very telling. In terms of China, China has embraced language learning. They started learning English really right at the end of the 80s, and I traveled and spent time there, and I could see that everyone wanted to find someone to practice English with. Today, without a doubt, the lingua franca is English. Chinese people conduct business with Japanese people in English. But increasingly, the number 2 language studied in many markets is Chinese. In the US, only 4% of schools even offer Chinese. And yet it's already the number 1 trading partner of the US, and within 15 years, it will be probably a much larger economy than the United States. Just wait for the revaluation when we start. It's already the biggest market for cell phones, for computers, and so forth. And we are totally unprepared, and our youth is going to graduate in 20 years from now, or in 15 years from now, ill-prepared for this future. They will be the few monolinguals left on the planet. They will be relying on everyone speaking their own language. And it will make it very hard for companies to move them around, to give them that global experience that is so necessary. And at the same time, probably about 66% or 56% of positions in companies will still be held by people who were born in the US and so on. But it's just about creating opportunity. You can always be successful. But I was at the education meeting up in New York with all the bigwigs, and they're very focused on math and science. And no doubt about it, we have to do much better on math and science. But let's not graduate monolingual math and science people in a very global world. Let's give them every opportunity. And I believe that with the right instruction in Chinese, plus aggressive development of sort of year abroad programs with China, and by the way, other emerging markets, we can develop in our youth a totally global culture that will give them really phenomenal prospects going forward.
Good. The next question is not related. You know, I've always been impressed with Intuit. They've got this kind of 6-step process for making sure that every iteration of their software is going to be kind of idiot-proof or intuitive for their customers. How are you staying in touch in a real formal way of getting customer feedback? How is it used? What are some of your real tricks of the trade there with the product?
So let me say that customers are double-edged sword in terms of feedback. If you do what they tell you, you probably mess everything up. Because customers, when I asked them the first time back in '03, so what would you like to see? They all said, we'd like a dictionary and a grammar book. And I said, are you satisfied with the product? High 90s in grammar books. So they totally missed the whole point of the product. Obviously, if you understood what their feedback was, I don't understand every single word you're teaching me. In other words, we're not teaching as well as we think we are. So we went back and improved our teaching method, or, you know, and really on both those counts. But what we do as a company is we have a huge research team. We probably have about 14 people, and all they do is research on the customer. And we have usability labs. We put cameras. By the way, it sounds all very expensive. It's not that expensive. Market research costs have collapsed, and if you can bring it in-house, it's very cheap. You can do surveys and user testing and so forth. But we have cameras on our test users. We have eye tracking. We see where their eyes go on the screen. We have emotional coding. We can see when they're happy, when they're not happy. And so we try to get to subconscious reads, more subtle insights about how they're enjoying a product. We've done a lot of development on the iPhone platform recently, going from they don't know at all how to use it to, actually it's very intuitive, and every single person that picked this up knew what to do. That was in very careful testing. And during that testing, it's not just a report from market research, but the product developers actually get involved and look at the video because they're able to sort of interpret what the problem is in a deeper way than a market researcher in terms of, so they're missing that, so I'll make that button bigger and then change that to that and take away that piece of text because that's distracting or something. They get very detailed, and usability is actually all about details and getting that right.
Tom, as you were building out this management team, I wanted to know what percentage of these folks came from outside the company versus inside the company? And on a related note, the number or percentage of people from the time you came in who were able to stay with the company during its transformation from private entrepreneur to professionally managed public companies?
So right now, 2,000 when I joined, just less than 100. Of that, less than 100, probably about 35 or 40 are still with the company. That's 7.5 years later. So, you know, obviously we would have liked to have had more of them, but frankly, many people don't like the company as it gets bigger. It's just not their thing. And so we've lost, you know, many folks that we are still friends with just because they wanted to take a step out and work in a different environment. Many of these that I brought on were from outside. And I'm not sure that's right, but in our case, it was necessary because our ambitions were so big, and we were really starting from a very scrappy place. In product development, the leadership is very much the same as it was you know, in 04, 05 timeframe. You know, that consistency has been extremely helpful to product development. I don't have a hard line. What I do is I do my org chart, and then I put, you know, grades, and I think, is this an A, is this a B or a C? And if they're B's or C's, then it's not right for their peers or for the organization at large that they still be in that position. What we've been successful at is changing people's roles. It's hard, but if you say it with enthusiasm and the role has career upside for the person who you're talking to, it is possible to have people move around. You know, the chief product officer we brought in from Leapfrog, the general counsel had been a public company general counsel, the CFO was someone that we had brought on from he had been a public company CFO. That was important to us. The CIO had been CIO in a public company. So we tried to build a really great team. But it's not just about experience. And actually, the way we hire is much more around your talent and that we think you're smart enough to solve problems that we will be encountering. But also, we do this top grading, which we talked about earlier. And I don't know, are you all familiar with top grading? Yeah. And what I was going to say about that was that top grading's biggest benefit to us is really about culture fit. So since we implemented it, the amount of mishiring has gone down tremendously. And we bring people, you know, we probably have a tighter filter on who comes in, but there's a discovery of, will this person communicate and behave in a way that's in line with how we behave? You know, admittedly, we probably rolled out top grading after we had brought those people on, but there was a kind of subconscious with that initial sort of hiring spree, where we got to a great team that really liked each other and liked working together.
Good. I think we've got time for one more question, if we have one. There.
Actually, three, if you don't mind. Okay. Tom, I've seen your product. I've used it. I speak many languages myself, coming from a small cosmopolitan island, and it's super product. Yeah. I don't have to tell you, but really impressed. A couple of questions. This PowerPoint presentation, is that on your website or in your?
This isn't. I'm happy to sort of share some of the slides with you if you give me your card at the end.
Okay, good. This one in particular, I think, very helpful. Yeah. The relationship between the block of VP Research and CFO, Are they on top of the top line of the reporting line to you, and then the CFO group, or?
Yeah, so the initial reporting line was much more of these sort of specialist, more doers, and they all reported to me. These others also report to me.
So all of those people report to you, the
yes.
2 blocks?
Yes.
Okay. And then the final question, where did the name come from, and what was the inspiration for the name Rosetta Stone?
Great question. So for those of you that know Napoleonic history, you know that Napoleon was out in Egypt trying to become the big star general, and he got to a town called Rashid. This was in 1799. And there he finds a stone that has 3 pieces of text. They immediately identify with Egyptologists that this could be real important because there's hieroglyphic, Demotic, and ancient Greek. And it so happens that Alexander the Great from Greece had taken over Egypt, and so he developed a lot of laws and so on in Egypt and had to communicate them in all the languages that people understood. So the Rosetta Stone then became this artifact that ended up in the British Museum because the British got hold of the stone there in Egypt, but the French had a carbon copy. There was an intellectual arms race between one guy in England and one guy in France trying to understand hieroglyphics using the Rosetta Stone. And Rashid was the name of the town in Egyptian, but it was actually called Rosetta by the French. And so it was the stone from Rosetta. And the French managed to understand hieroglyphics. The key insight was that hieroglyphics is much more phonetic. It's much more like an alphabet than it is like a script that you would see in China. And so they were able, so all the history we know about Egypt really comes from the Rosetta Stone, because they were, as a result of that breakthrough in understanding hieroglyphics, they were able to read all that history about Ramses and all this stuff. And so Rosetta Stone was a breakthrough in understanding a language. And that's the equity that we try to draw on.
So Tom, as we wrap up here, I mean, we're facing kind of a globalization. Any final kind of words to this audience of growth companies, mainly here from the United States and Canada? Any thoughts?
I mean, so the US essentially has had plenty to keep itself busy with back home. This is the biggest market in the world, it still is. And so small companies have been able to thrive based on all the opportunity that's right here. German companies have always had to go abroad. And Germany is not that much smaller a market than the US. Maybe it's a third or something like that of the US market. But the discipline of going international is something that I encourage you to all develop within your organizations. You're best in the world in almost every field you can imagine. It used to be that Europeans were better at cell phones, but I think that that's been flipped now, and it's now here that the greatest innovation is happening in terms of cell phones as well, or mobile technology. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be global. And yet when I asked the question about how many of you had offices overseas, very few of you did. So you're the best in the world at what you do, and yet you're not applying it in other markets. And it so happens that the other markets are going to grow like crazy over the next 30 years because all those countries are existing with living standards that are a fraction of those here in the US. They know what the living standards could be because they watch American movies. I don't need to tell you that. But America can be great at exporting as well as great at innovating. And for sure, there are some of the most fantastic global companies. The large ones are already American. But certainly small businesses in America hopefully will look more like German businesses in 10 to 15 years from now.
Good. Tom Adams, give him a hand. Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you've got to know, Tom, didn't you just come off of an international flight? I mean, you were just overseas, you flew in,
This
coming back, and so his willingness, given what he's doing around the globe, to kind of stop in here and share his wisdom as the entrepreneur last year. Again, give him another huge round of applause. Tom? Now, I'm going to hit into execution, and I know that you may need to sneak out for a restroom break. You may want to go over and talk to Tom. So here is the assignment for the next 10 minutes, and then I'm going to hit right on into the execution. I know I gave you an assignment yesterday morning when we got started that the single most important decision you must make is the 3 questions that somehow or another came to you over this couple of days that you're going to take back and work on. Because the truth is, there's 100 things that we've given you to work on. And if you don't take a few minutes right now with your team and decide and prioritize, hey, there may be 50, but these are the 3 most important given where our company is today. Think about it in terms of people, strategy, execution, and cash. First, which one of those areas you think is most critical. We had speakers that touched on each one of those areas, and the key is focus. So I'm going to give you exactly 10 minutes. I've got 4:30 up here. At 4:40, we're going to be hitting this hard again in terms of execution. So see you in 10 minutes. up there? Thanks.
Oh, it is? Yeah. Well, that way people don't. It's called no. You have to stop talking on the slide when it moves to the next one.
That is cool.
Yeah. So developers and designers and architects getting together after work to talk about what they're doing, and now there's project nights all over the world where people just come and they do different themes, right? So
25, 20 seconds.
6 minutes, 6 minutes, almost. Yeah.
There's a family. Good.
People from the afternoon.
Yep. Okay, 2-minute warning. Scott, what's your thought? What do you think? You guys can work on it.
That makes everything good for today.
Would you ever sell them Buffett?
It's an entrepreneurial company, and It's not Scott's company. It's a big company. That's actually another one. $sign because we're going to double, I think, in the next 5 years, and then double again 5 or 7. So it'll be like a $4 or $5 billion first thing. It's the first thing. We've got to be ready for that. So that's the two is just some stuff that I know is going on. It's around. It's not something weird. It's always talking about, even though I missed this presentation, I felt it. And it's I know we can get an extra million just out of training. Just running it better. Right. And so that's like a big so-called. Get in there. Run it better. Run your training. We already got it. Yeah. So that's another way. Are we staying so well in something as simple as a company that you send yourself? Well, I mean, we're 6 companies. Yeah. Right? Okay. So yeah. Okay. For me, okay. For me, I just like to listen. You're one of my benchmarks. Is Cindy still? Cindy Krieger? I don't know. Okay, no worries. I really don't.
Okay.
Craig, what's this thing called? You're going to talk about it before you start. Okay.
Okay, now we're going to get started here for kind of our last, what I'm going to call focus on execution. And it's going to involve some of my teachings. We're going to get into this last one-page tool that we have created. Again, you're going to be the first major audience to see it. And as kind of tradition during this slot, I want to bring up some other folks, particularly 2 people, to talk about some best practices around lean initiatives. Dewey, are you around and kind of ready for that process? And I also want to bring up CraigMarantz, who has always been kind of in the background as he's part of a massive company called Leeds that he runs, again providing just that kind of kindness to help us out these bags. And so if you would, give a huge, huge warm welcome to CraigMarantz. Craig, come on up.
Thanks. You know, Vern's always talking about that there's things that you learn at this conference and all of his webinars and everything that you can apply as soon as you get back to work or to your home life. Actually, we're going to hold on this just for a second. And so yesterday, I'm always, when I'm writing things down, I'm thinking, what am I going to apply right away? And yesterday when Chip talked about that elephant, and what really resonated with me was when he talked about the elephant that has a couple too many glasses of wine and then calls the ex-girlfriends. So being recently married, this was really, really on my mind. And so I'm thinking last night, you know, this is a good point. You know, is this going to happen to me again soon? And I'm thinking, well, how can I fix it? And it wasn't this morning until Bob spoke and he said, stop trying to think about the reason or the root cause. Because if I try to actually figure out why I might be calling these ex-girlfriends, I think I'll find myself in a little bit more trouble. So what I did today was, it seemed pretty simple. You just delete their name and phone number from your phone. So if anybody wants to apply that, I recommend it. So we'll go with the slide. I'm going to talk for 6 minutes and 40 seconds using a format I'll explain at the end. But Vern asked me to talk a little bit about our industry and give some case studies. We're the ones who gave out the bags. This is our industry. It's about $15 billion. Everything from business gift to trade show, giveaways, client recognition, employee recognition, volunteer gifts. So that's kind of what we do. And there's really 3 main purposes. Before I get those, I'll talk about lumpy mail. You've heard in Vern's Weekly Insights, he talks about lumpy mail. And I think that's the way to use promotional products that are a little bit different than just handing them out. And I'm going to go through some case studies that examine examples of lumpy mail. But there's 3 main purposes that I find for promotional products. Number 1 is to engage your employees and to have a conversation with employees, recognize employees, make sure they understand your strategy and to communicate to them. It's one of the best ways to communicate and make sure they understand the message. The next one is to gain market share. Okay, so
You all read in the Wall Street Journal this morning how Steve Jobs was very happy to report that they sold 14 million units and BlackBerry only sold 12 million. Both of these companies are using promotional products to gain market share. They give them to the different telephone companies. They're giving them out to consumers. They want people to use their products. So they're using it around market share. This is just an example of branding. Another purpose of promotional products is to get your brand recognized and known. So Raytheon didn't use this to give to employees. It wasn't, to gain new business. So their name is known out in the marketplace. Next slide. This is my way of branding. One of my employees once said to me, they said, Craig, you really make shit happen. Thank you. I was like, oh, that's good. Maybe I'll put that on a pen. So I put it on a pen and I sent it to all of my salespeople. Now I get emails from them. It's kind of a double-edged sword. I get these emails saying, Craig, here's my problem. Make shit happen. And that's just the end of it. So it's good. Juicy Fruit, this is an example of a journal book that we did. It actually came with a package of Juicy Fruit inside, and it was for students. It was a student planning tool. So not only did they announce a new brand and get that brand out into the marketplace, they were actually giving a very useful tool. The new experts, some people in this room may have received this mailing from me. It came inside an insulated lunch bag. This was a great example of lumpy mail. It came with a letter from me. It's only 150 people. I send it out quarterly. These people remember me, and it's a very inexpensive way to stay in touch with them. So it's a good example of lumpy mail. Bank of Texas, prospecting new people to open up accounts in the malls. They're giving out these magnifiers. They know their demographic in these malls and who they're going after, and they use the tagline, you won't find any hidden charges. So those are some kind of basic examples. This is Tony from Zappos at the Vegas Sales and Marketing Summit. He walks in wearing one of my competitors' bags. So what I do is the next day I make sure that we make a sample of our bag up with his logo on it, and we shipped it out to him right away. And a couple months later, a friend of mine saw him actually at another event, and he was using our bag. Now, promotional products, if you just massively send them out and you're not segmenting, just like with any marketing, it's not going to be effective. So we actually break our customers into partners, clients, customers, prospects, and outlook. And it's that segmented approach that we take when we're communicating our sales message or marketing. We don't look at our customers like this. We don't throw everybody into one bucket. I'm going to share some examples of people that I've seen do that. So what we try to do is we break them down, and we break it down based on, as I described, partners, clients, customers, prospects in this outlook segment. And what we do is we look at their past behavior. We look at their buying behavior. We look at the demographic within the company. We look at the size of the company. We look at how much they've spent with us before. The point is that we don't just throw everybody into one bucket and market to them as one client group. We really try to look at the different types of behavior. So, did this customer group buy this product range from us, but not buy this product range from us? Did they previously spend money with us in this product range, but not in this product range? And when we dig into that data, what we actually discovered was we found a group of 282 customers that one year bought $50,000 plus in bags from us. Next year, they were under 10,000. So we took that group, we did a pizza box, we put a tote bag inside, we had all kinds of messaging around tote bags and why leads for tote bags, and we took, of those 282, 178 returned back to over $50,000. This is the BMW magazine some of you may get, I get it, so do 100 other thousand people get it. There's no segmented approach here. I was in BMW the other day for an hour and a half while my car was being serviced. I'm there, the salesperson doesn't come out to see me. There's no approach. They don't come out and ask, how's your wife's car? Do they know that I buy my mom a car? They don't know any of this. So I think it's a good example of where, also with Four Seasons, if they looked at their data, they would see that I've stayed at a Four Seasons every year for the last 4 years for 4 nights. They're not coming to me and offering me to do another stay. They're just sending out, again, the same thing that they're sending to everyone. So I kind of think of BMW and Four Seasons, even though they're great brands, that they're not standing out in the crowd, especially with their marketing. And that's what we really try to do, and I think you can do it with promotional products. You can mine your data, find clients that have certain behavior, and then approach them with a certain message. So I encourage you to think about how are you segmenting your accounts and how you're communicating with deactivated accounts. A lot of times people forget, you know, they're just doing acquisition after acquisition and they're not actually looking back and realizing deactivated also doesn't need to be 0. You can set a higher bar. There's the bag from today. One of you left it in your room. I think shame on you for that. But what happened was the maid has picked it up and she's taking it home. So even if people don't use the product that you give out, somebody else will pick it up. This is going to end up in a mall, at the beach, at Disney World. So it's always going to get used. Thanks a lot.
Give him a hand. So, Craig, explain what you did, because that was part of the learning here. So explain this.
Is this on?
Yes.
Well, you know, I used a slide format called Picha Kucha. Has anybody heard of Picha Kucha? 1, 2, 3, about 4. It's a format of 20 slides, 20 seconds each, and it originated in Tokyo, where designers and architects got together after work, and they really wanted to limit people on their time and what they had to say, and really focus on images as well. So I think it's a great format. It works out to be 6 minutes and 40 seconds. And you can download the template, or you can just set it so it just moves every 20 seconds. And there's Picha Kucha nights now for all kinds of different industries and hobbies. People get together and they just come in, and that's the format that they use.
Good. Give Craig another hand for that. Nice work. I think it's a great idea. I think we may start doing that in our own company and say, hey, you've got 20 slides, 20 seconds to get the point across, and a great way to be able to mine ideas quickly. But you're not going to hold me to that. Okay, so first thing I want to do before we all get out of here is to thank you as our customers, and our hope is that we have provided value over these 2 days. We know you're not loyal, but hopefully we will remain your preference. I want to just thank our support folks, Core Staging, who's been running this show, Kara, Executive Events, who behind the scenes got us this great deal here at this Ritz-Carlton. Again, non-Sales by 5. All of those little mini interviews I've been doing are up now. I'm going to send those out in terms of links tomorrow at gazelles.com, in my weekly insight. But they can go get them immediately at our youtube.com/gazelles. What's that? Gazelles TV. So youtube.com/Gazelles TV. I've already got interviews. It was interesting when I interviewed Tom Adams. One of the key things he said is, way before he even joined to run Rosetta Stone, he's always had a coach. The guy's name is Ed. Talks with him every single week, and his main thing is kind of kick him in the butt and make sure that he's continuing to perform. And so I think it supports that notion that no one's ever achieved peak performance without a coach. So Nan, thank you for capturing all those things and get him up quick. By the way, I think we're also going to have a couple of the programs that we did here up on the web quickly by tomorrow as well. Again, thanks to the Ritz-Carlton, NJW, for you guys that were next door. And then obviously a thanks to the Gazelles team. It takes actually a lot of folks to make sure this thing is happening very, very smoothly behind the scenes. My 2 co-executives, Patrick and Keith, my team, Joanne, Elaine, Donna, Missy, Jan and Anna, who are helping run the G200 initiative. Obviously on Patrick's side, Cindy and Ryan, Carmen, Nancy, Jean, Maureen, and Jennifer. I know you guys have been of great help, obviously, to Keith and the coaches division. So much appreciate that. Now I want to focus here on kind of the people decision, but it's going to flow into execution. So make sure you've got open up the blue folder, and in there you're going to see an orange worksheet. It's going to be right after David Meerman Scott's single page in order. Obviously the key question always has been in people, would you enthusiastically rehire everybody you have today, knowing what you know about them? That's when nobody wants to make eye contact with their boss at the table and get that kind of uncomfortable look at this moment. There, by the way, has been our standard growth tool, and I think it works well and continue to remain relevant all the way up through companies with IPO. Notice, by the way, we don't have titles. I agreed with Tom on that, because often you've got to, elevate folks, and once you lock people into titles, it can be kind of weird taking titles away from folks. But what never changes is all of these functions must continue to happen. So I'm not going to go over this form. Most of you are very familiar with it, but the idea is that it was very focused on the functions. And remember, when you guys started out, if the entrepreneur's still in the room, whose name was in every one of those boxes? It's kind of me, 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 me. And all growing a business is trying to figure out which one of those boxes you're going to try to kind of give away next. And for you to make sure that they're working on the right stuff, those are those key performance indicators in that second column right here. And then in the third column, what parts of the P&L and balance sheet do they have accountability for? And if you're not familiar with that tool, let us know and we'll get you some resources to work on that. What I've done, though, is recognize that when you get over about 40 to 50 employees, all of a sudden you have to start thinking more horizontally. You almost have to kind of turn the company on its side and look at it horizontally. And that's these processes. And by the way, one of the biggest challenges I'm finding at the people's level in terms of execution, and remember, execution was almost equal with strategy in terms of you voting on it as critical to your company, is that the senior leadership, the leadership you had in place running sales and marketing and HR and IT and accounting and finance, above 50 employees, they have to think beyond their function and start looking cross-functionally. And that sounds easy intellectually, but I actually find in reality it's very hard often for those leaders to be able to make that fundamental shift. It also means that they've been used to kind of being the head of their own fiefdom. Now they truly, even though, hey, we get along and have our weekly meeting, now on more of a daily and hourly basis, they need to truly be working together cross-functionally to make sure that that process is running smoothly. And so where I felt there was a failure in our methodology is that we had you well focused on accountabilities at the functional level, but we did not spend enough time at the process level. And so thus, the creation of this new one-page tool. It's not complicated. But what it says is, and I find if I give you blanks, then you will be forced, there's this almost human need to fill them in, is there's 10 kind of places for you to write the names of the 4 to 9 processes that basically run your business. And there shouldn't be less than 4, otherwise I don't think you're being granular enough. If you've got more than 9 or 10, I think you're going to be too microscopic and it's going to be hard for you to get your arms around. And by the way, a lot of these processes will have similar names across every company in this room. It's how do we get a customer and get them into our process? How do we go out and bill and collect? How do we get a new product launched? How do we get the new version 3.0 of the software out to the marketplace? How do we choose, the inventory we're going to be carrying the next season and then get it all the way into the store and tracked? So there'll be 3 or 4 that are common, but there will be 3 or 4 that are actually very, very unique. They're probably related to your brand promise or your underlying one-phrase strategy or those activities that differentiate you. And then once you've named those 4 to 9, which is what you're going to put here, then you need to be crystal clear who is the person that is accountable. And remember, the word accountable doesn't mean boss, doesn't mean they do it all, doesn't mean they run it all, but there's got to be somebody accountable, the ability to count. And I got to tell you, I've had some of the most interesting conversations when I get the management team in a room and say, okay, but which one of you kind of owns the accountability for these processes. And because you're cutting across functions, there can be some underlying turf battles that you were never really aware of that finally get surfaced in a real way. And some of those tools that were shared yesterday, both in Liz's side and Mo's side, you're going to need in order to sort out some of these battles in the organization. And then obviously, it's going to be important for you to have a couple, 3 KPIs that give you a sense. I've hardly given you really enough space here. What I want you to put in the third column is the single most important KPI for every one of those processes is what, if you were to guess? First and foremost, what must you measure with every process? It's speed. That's exactly right. And that's where all this work around lean is become critical. Because at the end of the day, at the heart of lean is how do you take a process and shorten its cycle? The sales cycle, the cycle of getting a new release in the marketplace, the cycle for getting a new customer onboarded, a cycle for getting a new product developed. And we know that if you could essentially shorten the time, you will generally also reduce its cost. That gets at many of the stuff that Rich was talking about naturally when you dig inside the organization and look at those costs and find those 3 1%ers that give you basically a 20% increase to the bottom line. And it also, strangely, usually improves quality. Because for you to shorten it, you got to take a lot of complexity usually out and a lot of just people touching it. So here's your assignment, and I want you to, while you're here, let's do just a little bit of work on it. Get with your team, and I want you to make your first cut at naming. What are those 4 to 9 kind of key processes that cut across your organization, and who is accountable for each one of those? So let me give you here about 7 or 8 minutes. Go. See what you come up with. guys the Applebee's group from local, mainly?
Applebee's is different brands throughout
It is. You guys all over Europe, so welcome.
You're coming to visit us next month.
Yeah, I am. Yes, November 15th.
15th,
Yes, I look forward to it. So anyway, guys, glad you're here. Hope it's been useful to pick up some ideas. Yeah. Good. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to come this distance. Might be sharing flights with you on the way back. Guys, got the list? Here your you know, I actually have the disc with me. But I have to ride with you. Phenotypical. That's how I order my red wine. Right? And my That's it. I wanted to be 6 months. We're going to live in India. So we said back up to Europe. The place I thought Europe was. And it's really nice to do this in China. Plus, I wanted to live where I could vacation. We got U.S. well covered with our coaches, guys. Good. Okay, one more minute. Okay, I recognize this kind of thing. The last company I did it for, Softonic, in Barcelona about, when was it? When did we do that? September, so just about 6 weeks ago. This was about a it seems like something you should be able to do in 3 minutes. It took us 3 hours, with the senior team to really kind of get it named right. Settle on who was going to be the person accountable, and if we had the right person even available with kind of the skills, and then for us to set out what we're going to be just 2 or 3 of the kind of key performance indicators we're going to look at. And so with that, Dewey, come on up here real quick. DeweyJenkins, give him a hand as he's coming on up here. And Dewey and I were talking before the conference a couple months ago, and he was kind of sharing with me real quick some of his successes implementing Lean initiatives. So tell me a little about the company and then a couple, 3 of the successes and how you guys have been working Lean.
Okay. We are a service company, a heating and air conditioning service company in Charlotte, North Carolina. To give you a little background on our history, I've owned the company for 20 years. 18 of those years, we averaged 20% per year growth, and then the recession came along in 2009. We were down a little bit. At that time, it dawned on us that that was a real good time to begin looking internally at the customers that we already had, because we had grown our company simply through marketing. I mean, it was marketing, marketing, marketing. We have a jingle that is well known in our community. Late last night, I can't sing, so forgive me for this, but late last night I woke up shivering in my bed. That darned old furnace, it was completely dead. So I called Morris Jenkins, and they very kindly said, you'll have warm heat at your house tonight. So we have played off that. We have marketing, and then it dawned on me that we're in a recession. We don't know how bad this thing is going to be. We need to pay attention to our customers, the ones that we already have. And looking at that, we decided we waited a long time to really look at our customers. We were giving our customers what we thought they wanted from our experience of 10 or 15 years ago. So we decided, we were introduced to Lean a few Gazelle conferences back, and we began to look at it. How do you do Lean in a service business? A little different from the typical manufacturing Lean. We began looking at it through the eyes of the customer, looking at every system that we had through the eyes of the customer. Not how it looks to us, not does it make it easier for us, does it make it easier for the customer to do business with us?
So give me an example of one of those processes you guys looked at.
And a good example of one of those processes is simply, how do we take a phone call? How easy is it for a customer to schedule a service call with us? Because we're the people who play 20 questions when you call. We want to know how old your system is. We want to know this. We want to know that. We want to know this. We began listening to our customers as they went through that process, and we were saying, oh my gosh, if that were me, I would have hung up. So we went from probably 20 questions down to 4 or 5, no more than that. But we began looking at how, when people called in to schedule a sales appointment with us, what did we do there? How can we simplify that? We then began talking with our technicians. What do we do with you when you get out to a customer's house and you don't have that part on your truck? What do we do? How do we simplify that process for our customers? We then began listing that we operate 7 days a week. We have a regular scheduled technicians working Saturday and Sunday, so we said, hey, we're doing great there. But we began listening to our customers. We found that we had customer service reps that were in the office until 8 o'clock. Well, we found out by listening that we weren't getting all the calls that were coming in, so we upped our customer service reps in the evening, and we kept them there until 11 o'clock at night. Then we found that, again, by listening, and we were listening to the calls that were coming in from our customers, that when they were calling in at 7 o'clock at night, we were telling them, we'll be out there first thing in the morning. And we thought that was good service. But we began listening, and we found out, they want us to come out tonight. Let's see now. You'll have warm heat at your house tonight. We began listening, so we put on a second shift of technicians that come in at noon and work until 11 o'clock at night. We now have that shift up to 18 technicians, so that if you call in at 7 o'clock or at 8 o'clock now, you'll have cool air at your house tonight. But we're going through every system that we have with the purpose, again, of looking at it through the eyes of the customer.
Dewey, what about any savings? Any productivity gains? Do you have a sense you can grow given the same head count? Any of those? I know you and I talked a little bit about some of those.
We have a sense that we will get great productivity gains. This has been the most difficult thing that we have ever done. We're in the midst of working through this. We think that once we fully implement Lean within our systems, that we will have at a minimum 40% more capacity with the same people that we have now. If we do it exemplary, we may have almost 50%.
Good. Give Dewey a hand. Thank you so much. That's appreciated. Good. And I want you to remember, the definition of waste in Lean is when you're doing anything that the customer doesn't like. And so asking 20 questions, even though it's useful to you, is a waste. It sucks up time, eats up capacity, and that's the kind of very simple, detailed work you've got to look at. What's critical is overall, I recommend that the people you've got accountable for each of these processes, it can be one of them, or they can all report to somebody else, but you need at least one person on your team that is a process maven. They eat, live, breathe, and sleep this stuff, and they know how to go in there and examine them, map them, and get them cleaned up while they're measuring and monitoring them along the way. Now, if you would, Dominic, pop up. I want to show you guys just one little thing that we created real quick, so go to our homepage. Hopefully this is going to be a tool that's going to be of help. We're going to do it with all of our one-page tools. If you would, this is our home page. Hit the download button. And by the way, that's where you go now to our new Gazelles growth tools. There's people, strategy, execution, cash. Click on the strategy one, Dominic, if you would. That'll expand. And go down to the second one. We have just created our new video book, a VOOC, for the updated one-page strategic plan, so he'll launch that. That's how you get to it. And notice as he rolls over every one of the boxes, it gives you a chance, if you would, click on that. There's now a little video. We're almost like the Rosetta Stone of the one-page plan. And it's me popping up.
This is an idea that Jim Collins and Jerry Ford popularized in their book, Built to Last. This is basically a handful of rules.
Okay, we can stop it. You don't need to listen to it. But every one of those is about 60 to 90 seconds. And so we've made it interactive. By the way, you can then also, if you push the other button, push that, you can fill it in online, and then at the end of it, you're able to print it out. And so it is there as a new interactive tool. We're now going to create those over the next couple months for all of our other one-page tools. And so that's our gift to you. It's there for free, and hope you have a chance to use it and benefit from it. So what I want to do is, Dominic, thank you so much. I've got about 10 minutes. I don't like to let class out early. You need to get full value. Is shoot your questions at me, and I will kind of pop out as I've been running around. People ask me why I like running the mics. It gives me a chance to get out among you and see you and touch some of you and the whole bit, so that's why I enjoy doing it. So any kind of last questions about what we've been discussing or what we're up to?
Sorry, in addition to asking, who was the young guy in the video? No, I love the tool. I love the tool. Are you guys developing that custom? Like, that was pretty unique in terms of the interactive documents, and one of the things that we're looking at in our business is building tools, similar tools that we can give away, and developing them from scratch is tough. So is that based on a software, or is it?
We tried to go to VOOC. I mean, the minute Seth Godin announced this company VOOC, I was on the phone with him in about 12 nanoseconds to say, hey, we'd like to look at doing this. But they didn't have all the components in terms of it actually being an interactive document. So we actually have a pretty smart guy that we have contracted that who works full-time at Rosetta Stone. And Tom knows about it because he got him from doing work from us, and because we're right there in the DC area. And so on the weekends, the reason they hired him, because he's so darn good at this kind of stuff. And so we've contracted him to develop these things for us on the side. And so it's worked out. It's been a nice partnership. And he does it really quick. It's custom, but the new tools, we're actually now porting this to, there's like version 5 of Flash or something like that. I don't know all this kind of stuff, but it will now very quickly be on the iPhone and the iPad as well. And these new tools, he built it in about 3 days. And so it's a lot easier than it used to be, kind of thing. By the way, I hope you guys go out and look at our new online courses as well. He just built a whole new navigation system for it so that all of the slides are along the bottom, and so you can look at the slide, and if you just want to go right to that slide, you click on it, and it'll go right to that part of the video. And so you can take what was a 1 hour and just go to the 3 slides that you really most care about. We've got Pat Lencioni up there, and David Meerman Scott, and all these guys, and we think hopefully you use that as education for your middle management and upper management moving forward. What's that, please?
G200. Your G200 program, we get the newsletter, we were all talking about it, and somehow we've missed the plugs around that. Can you just tell us about that?
No, because it's an invitation only. So I'll call you when we think you're ready. And it's that's not to be mean. We're in beta, we're actually out of beta, and we're running full force with 22 companies, and they've been kind enough, because they have been, I hope, loyal as much as preference. They're putting up with some of our mistakes. And when that thing is full-blown, it'll be really more formally announced next April, kind of thing. But basically, it's a club. We've decided we're going deep, And we want to pull all of our resources into helping what we think are 200 companies that dominate their industries, like Logical Choice. And if we can put every one of our ounce of efforts into them, as you guys want to do, we want to help you go from 100 million to $500 million to $1 billion. You know, Scott's sitting over here at $1 billion on his way to $5 billion, and we want to be a part of that effort. And we think if that happens, we're going to make a huge difference in the world. And so we've launched a similar group in Australia. We've got a group launching in India. And then we're going to link those groups together in a very tight club. So we decided rather than be big with everybody, we're going to be focused narrow with some select companies. Some other things, though, ask me about that's helpful to your company directly. Who do we have? Yeah, please. Just shout it out.
Vernon, adding
Thanks.
the processes to, as in addition to the functional side, seems like a great addition.
Yeah, thanks.
Back in the old days when we went through the P&L and I identified people responsible for each line in the P&L.
Yes.
Do you have guidelines for, you say 4 to 9 processes of how you identify, because if you look at the total, you know, in the operations of a company, how do you narrow it to 4 to 9? Are there guidelines where, I guess the question was, we used the P&L for the functional side.
Yep, that was here. You got it.
But on the process side, is there a similar type guideline on that?
No, it's not. No, it's really just knowing your business and what are the things we do, I think is the way to kind of take a look at it.
Okay.
And you know what? I am not the most versed in lean. The guys that are really, the Guy Parsons and others now that are applying lean to service companies, start by watching his online course that we've got. It's like $99. It's how we started with Softonic, and I had their whole management team watch that video, and then we got in a room and just laid them out.
So for example, if you look at sales, I mean, you've got
Yes.
your existing customers, and then you've got, you know, if you're trying to expand into new markets, those are, you know, we would have those as 2 separate processes.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay.
That'd be fine. What else? Any topic, not just on what I talked about. Please.
Is a BHAG supposed to be emotional?
That is like, that's why if you go back to Jim Collins' original HBR article, Building a Company's Vision, that's why the one piece we really have never given you space to, and it's probably our mistake, is the big, hairy, audacious goal has to be measurable. And then the third component of that is what he called the envisioned future. And in there, you can build in a whole bunch of emotion. Now, do I think the BHAG has to be something the team is excited about? And as a result, that's what gives it emotion? You bet. And that's why working for revenue isn't necessarily the most exciting thing, but the fact that we can dominate these 20 product categories, you know, both on the web and in reality, is what gets the juices flowing. It's got to get the... You got it. Just go to the chip stuff. And as we said, we're starting to incorporate some of Chip's ideas Patrick already has into the Gazelle Systems execution stuff. But in general, it's got to be measurable. And then it's got to have that excitement. I don't know if that necessarily means emotion. And then write the envision future piece. So just go back and read Jim's article, Building a Company's Vision. I've got time for 2 more questions. Anyone else? Anything else on your mind? How do you spell Picha Kucha? That's a good one. Craig, are you still around? Does anyone know how to spell Picha Kucha? Hold on. Okay. Okay. But you can't find it, huh? All right. Any other question? Okay, 2 last ideas. The 2 that I'm finding work the best, I just want to give them as reminders. I wrote about it about a year ago. Taurus Wines, which is this 150-year-old family business in Spain. They are the largest now exporter of Spanish wine in the world. They're in 150 countries. The vineyards they use are actually 300 years old. So first of all, it's been interesting for me when I work with these European companies that they have such unbelievable heritage. I mean, a lot of these companies were around when our country was just kind of thinking about starting up. And one of the neatest little tools that they created starting 50 years ago is what they call their Black Book. And it is actually a list of all of the mistakes, kind of the dumb moves that they have made over time. And whenever they hire anybody, the first thing they must do in their orientation is kind of read through the Black Book. And anytime somebody does something pretty stupid, they're sent to the Black Book in order to kind of document it. And I thought, that's a cool thing. It's not about focusing on the problem when you're supposed to be looking for bright spots. Don't get me wrong there. But there is this institutional memory that I think ends up getting lost if you don't go take the effort to keep track of this. So after he shared this with us, so it was actually at a big EO meeting that we had, I pulled him aside and I said, okay, so what was the last listing? And he said, well, it was our chief financial officer. Right now, currencies are crazy, and so we've got him hedging those currencies. And he'd asked us about how long we ought to keep a hedge on a particular currency. And the management team told him, our collective wisdom was, it ought to, he needs to get out here in about this period. Well, he second-guessed all of us, and he stayed in longer than he needed to, and it cost us about $250,000. Now, in and of itself on a company this size, but the lesson around not really heeding the advice of the management team, not coming really back to us and letting us know that he was going to ignore us. He just unilaterally went out and made the decision, violated a few of kind of what were our sacred values, though maybe not written. And so he was sent to the Black Book and had to kind of write up his failure as a result. So I thought that was a good, clever thing you might use an internal wiki today to try to keep track of. Last thing I want to remind you of is this importance, again, senior leadership to get their strategic thinking time by meeting for breakfast or lunch once or twice a week, separate from the operational management meeting. And it's got to be a formal meeting. It can't just be passing in the night and during the day in your offices. So just a couple of ideas to go out there and take a look at. I have so appreciated those of you who've hung in here to the very end, as always. Best of luck, and we look forward to seeing all of you in Houston, April 19th and 20th for our Leadership Summit. You guys, thank you very much. You are to rate me, so let me have it. Be kind, though, and I'll be out there to say goodbye.